Ambassador Zethka clicked his mandibles in satisfaction as he reviewed the final subjugation decree. The holographic display showed Earth's blue marble suspended in the center of the council chamber, surrounded by representatives from 47 star systems. Today marked the end of humanity's brief and unremarkable independence. The motion passes unanimously, announced High Arbitrator Vex 9, her crystalline form pulsing with authoritative purple light. The species designation human is hereby classified as a Class D civilization and placed under direct council oversight. All military assets will be confiscated, all interstellar travel suspended, and all technological development monitored. Zethka's thorax swelled with pride. As the Ketheri representative, he had championed this motion for 3 cycles. Humans were dangerous, he had argued, not because of their primitive weapons or laughable fleet of 37 vessels, but because of their unpredictability. They had joined the galactic community only 50 years ago, yet they had already violated 17 different protocols and started 2 minor diplomatic incidents. The human ambassador, Sarah Chen, stood slowly from her designated spot in the lower tier. Her species was remarkably small compared to most council members, barely reaching Zethka's secondary joints. Her pale skin had flushed red, a biological response he had learned indicated anger or embarrassment. Honored Council, Chen began, her voice steady despite the obvious stress chemicals Zethka's sensors detected. I request permission to address this body before the decree is enacted. High Arbitrator Vex 9's form flickered with mild annoyance. The time for debate has passed, Ambassador Chen. The vote was unanimous. Then I request permission to make a final statement on behalf of my species. The chamber fell silent. Even the Hydrax delegates stopped their constant bubbling. Zethka felt a flutter of unease. Humans were known for their emotional outbursts, but Chen's controlled demeanor suggested something different. Permission granted, Vex 9 said finally. You have 3 minutes. Chen walked to the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. She looked up at the assembled representatives, her dark eyes moving from species to species. When her gaze fell on Zethka, he felt an unexpected chill run down his exoskeleton. 67 years ago, Chen began. My great-grandfather was a young soldier, fighting in what we called World War II. His unit was surrounded by enemy forces in a place called Bastonia. The enemy commander sent a message demanding surrender. My great-grandfather's commanding officer sent back a single-word response. She paused, letting the translation systems catch up. Nuts. A few delegates made sounds of confusion. The Yitheran ambassador's translator made a series of frustrated beeps. It means no, Chen clarified. But it means much more than that. It means we would rather die fighting than live kneeling. It means you have fundamentally misunderstood what you're dealing with. Zethka leaned forward. Ambassador Chen, your historical anecdotes are irrelevant. Your species lacks the military capacity to resist council authority. Chen smiled, and something about that expression made Zethka's skin crawl. You're absolutely right, Ambassador Zethka. We have 37 ships. You have tens of thousands. We have kinetic weapons and basic energy shields. You have reality-warping technology and planet crackers. By every logical metric, resistance is futile. Then you accept the Council's authority? Asked Vex 9. I accept that you have the power to enforce your will, Chen replied. But I want you to understand something before you do. You've studied our history, our psychology, our culture. You've read our literature and analyzed our social structures. But you've missed the most important thing about humanity. The chamber was absolutely silent now. Even the background hum of the station's life support seemed muted. You see weakness where we see strength, Chen continued. You see chaos where we see freedom. You look at our wars and see violence. You look at our arguments and see discord. You look at our tendency to question authority and see insubordination. But you've never asked yourselves the most important question. Why does a species that fights itself so much always unite when faced with an external threat? Zethka felt his confidence wavering. The human was building to something, and every instinct told him it wouldn't be pleasant. You want to know why humans are dangerous? Chen's voice rose slightly, carrying to every corner of the chamber. It's not because we're strong. We're not. It's not because we're smart. Half the species in this room are smarter. It's not because we're technologically advanced. We're barely out of our home system. She turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly. We're dangerous because we don't know when to quit. We're dangerous because we've never met a problem we wouldn't try to solve by hitting it harder. We're dangerous because we've spent our entire history being told that something was impossible, and then doing it anyway. The Vorthan delegate made a dismissive gesture with his tentacles. Empty rhetoric, human. Your defiance changes nothing. Chen's smile widened. Doesn't it? Let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to subjugate us. You're going to take our ships, ground our pilots, and put restrictions on our technology. You're going to treat us like children who need supervision. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Yet somehow everyone heard every word. And we're going to remember. Every human child born under your rule will grow up knowing that their freedom was taken by aliens who thought they knew better. Every human adult will go to sleep angry and wake up angrier. Every human scientist will spend their regulated research time figuring out ways around your restrictions. Every human engineer will look at your technology and ask themselves how they can build something better. Zethkot tried to interrupt, but Chen continued relentlessly. You think you're preventing another war by controlling us, but you're guaranteeing one, because humans don't just fight for territory or resources or ideology. We fight for the right to fight. We fight for the right to be wrong. We fight for the right to make our own mistakes and learn from them. The chamber erupted in protests and arguments, but Chen spoke over them all. So yes, honored council, subjugate us. Put your restrictions in place. Send your peacekeepers to watch over us. But remember this moment when your perfect order starts falling apart. Remember that you had a choice, and you chose to cage the one species in the galaxy that will never, ever stop trying to break free. With that, Ambassador Sarah Chen walked out of the council chamber, leaving behind a room full of very uncomfortable aliens and one very worried Cathari diplomat who was beginning to think he had made a terrible mistake. The decree was signed 30 minutes later. 6 months after the subjugation decree, Captain Elena Vasquez stared out the viewport of the orbital station that had once been humanity's primary military command center. Now it served as headquarters for the Council's pacification fleet, commanded by Admiral Korth Vel of the Hegemony Navy. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was still technically the station commander, though her authority now extended to little more than managing the human crew's meal schedules. The view showed Earth's major cities, their lights dimmed by the energy restrictions imposed by the Council. No more than basic power for essential services. No manufacturing beyond food production and basic medical supplies. No research into anything the Council deemed potentially destabilizing. Captain, called Lieutenant Martinez from the communications station. We're receiving another priority transmission from Admiral Korth Vel. He wants to see you in the command center immediately. Elena sighed. The Hegemony Admiral had been increasingly agitated lately, though she couldn't figure out why. The human population was complying with all directives. There had been no violence, no open rebellion, no dramatic gestures of defiance. If anything, humans seemed to be adapting to their new circumstances with surprising grace. She made her way through the corridors, noting how her crew members went about their duties with quiet efficiency. The Council observers, various aliens assigned to monitor human behavior, seemed pleased with the compliance they witnessed. What they didn't see were the subtle signs Elena had learned to recognize. The way her people's eyes lingered on schematics, the questions they asked about Council technology, the way they volunteered for every maintenance duty that brought them into contact with alien equipment. The command center bustled with activity. Admiral Korth Vel stood at the central holotable, his reptilian features twisted in frustration. Around him, his staff officers worked at stations that had been hastily retrofitted with hegemony technology. The familiar human interfaces had been replaced with alien controls that none of the original crew understood. Captain Vasquez, Korth Vel's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. Explain to me why your people keep volunteering for additional duties. Elena kept her expression neutral. Sir, humans generally prefer to stay busy. Idle time leads to depression and social problems. Busy doing what? The Admiral gestured at a data pad. In the past week alone, I've had requests from your crew to assist with engine maintenance, power grid calibration, waste recycling optimization, and atmospheric processing upgrades. These are not areas that require human involvement. My people are naturally curious, Admiral. They want to understand how things work. Korthvel's eyes narrowed. Or they want to understand how to break things that work. Elena felt a surge of anger but kept it hidden. With respect, sir, my crew has performed every assigned task without incident. Our efficiency ratings are actually higher than they were before the transition. This was true, and it clearly bothered the Admiral. Elena suspected he had expected more resistance, more drama. The Council's psychological profiles of humans emphasized their emotional nature and tendency toward rebellion. What they hadn't anticipated was how effectively humans could channel those traits into patient, methodical observation. Captain, let me be direct. Korthvel moved closer, his presence intimidating despite Elena's efforts to remain calm. I've been monitoring your people for 6 months. I've watched them comply with every order, follow every protocol, and show proper deference to Council authority. And yet, he paused, studying her face. I don't believe them. Something is wrong. Your species is planning something. Elena allowed herself a small smile. Admiral, you're giving us too much credit. What could we possibly be planning? You control our ships, our weapons, our communication networks. You monitor our research facilities and limit our manufacturing capabilities. If we were planning something, you'd know about it, would I? Korthvel activated the holotable, showing a 3-dimensional map of human space. Your compliance is too perfect, Captain. In my experience, conquered species go through predictable phases: anger, depression, bargaining, and finally acceptance. Your people skipped directly to acceptance, and that's not natural. The truth was, humans hadn't skipped anything. They had simply compressed all those phases into the first month and moved on to something the Admiral's psychology texts hadn't prepared him for. Adaptation. Perhaps, Elena suggested carefully. Humans are more practical than your models predicted. We understand when we're outmatched. Before Korthvel could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. His staff officers called out status reports in rapid succession. Admiral, we're detecting power fluctuations across the station. Main computer core is experiencing cascade failures. Life support systems are switching to backup power. Communication array is offline. Korthvel spun toward Elena, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. What have you done? Elena raised her hands innocently. Nothing, sir. My people are all at their assigned stations. Check your monitoring systems. One of the hegemony technicians looked up from his console. Admiral, internal sensors confirm that all human personnel are accounted for and performing routine duties. No unauthorized access to critical systems. Then what's causing these failures? Elena bit her lip as if reluctant to speak. Admiral, with your permission, I might have an explanation. Speak. 6 months ago, when the Council took control of this station, your technicians integrated hegemony systems with our existing infrastructure. But you didn't replace everything. You just overlaid your technology on ours. Korthvel's expression grew dangerous. Are you suggesting that Council technology is somehow inferior? Not inferior, sir, just different. Human systems were designed with different principles. We tend to over-engineer things, build in redundancies, create multiple backup systems. Your technology is more elegant, more efficient. But when you force elegant systems to work with redundant ones... Another alarm sounded and the lights flickered. The integration is breaking down, Elena continued. The incompatibilities are finally cascading through the system. It was always going to happen eventually. This was partially true. Human and alien technologies were indeed incompatible in many ways. What Elena didn't mention was that her people had spent 6 months subtly adjusting parameters, introducing tiny fluctuations, and making microscopic modifications that would eventually add up to exactly this moment. Can it be fixed? Korthvel demanded. Absolutely, Elena said promptly, but it will require a complete system redesign. We'll need to either fully convert to hegemony technology or return to human systems. Convert everything to Council standards, immediately. Elena nodded. Of course, sir. But that will take time. Months, possibly years. And you'll need human technicians who understand the original systems to help with the transition. Korthvel stared at her for a long moment. and Elena could see the wheels turning. He knew he was being manipulated somehow, but he couldn't see how. The evidence supported everything she was saying. His own sensors confirmed that no humans had accessed critical systems. The technical explanations made sense to his engineers. "Very well," he said finally. "But I want Council observers monitoring every step of the process." "Of course, Admiral." As Elena left the command center, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The plan was working perfectly. Humans had indeed adapted to their new circumstances, but not in the way the Council expected. They had learned patience. They had learned to work within the system while quietly undermining it. They had learned that sometimes the best way to fight overwhelming force was to become indispensable to those who wielded it. Phase 1 was complete. The Council now needed human expertise to maintain their own control systems. Phase 2 would be even more interesting. Dr. James Park adjusted his safety goggles and smiled at the Council observer hovering beside his workstation. The ethereal delegate, a floating mass of crystalline formations that called itself Insight Seeker, had been assigned to monitor the human research facility for the past 8 months. Its purpose was to ensure that no unauthorized experiments or potentially dangerous research occurred. "The quantum resonance patterns are fascinating," James said cheerfully, pointing at the holographic display showing energy wavelengths. "Your people's understanding of subspace mechanics is truly impressive." Insight Seeker's crystals pulsed with satisfaction. The ethereals prided themselves on their intellectual superiority, and the humans' obvious admiration was gratifying. The principles are elementary once one grasps the fundamental nature of dimensional barriers. "Oh, absolutely," James agreed, making careful notes on his tablet. "Though I have to admit, some of the applications still confuse me. Like this energy pattern here." He highlighted a specific wavelength. "It seems to create resonance in biological neural networks." "Correct. That frequency range can be used for peaceful crowd control or emergency communication directly to sentient brains." James nodded thoughtfully. "And this other pattern?" He indicated another wavelength. "That disrupts electronic systems at the quantum level. Quite useful for disabling primitive technology without causing permanent damage." "Remarkable," James murmured, adding more notes. Around the laboratory, other human researchers worked at similar stations, each paired with a Council observer from different species. The aliens seemed pleased with the humans' eagerness to learn about advanced galactic science. What the observers didn't realize was that they were providing a comprehensive education in Council military technology to some of humanity's brightest minds. Dr. Sarah Kim, working at the adjacent station with a hegemony observer, was learning about SHIELD harmonics. Dr. Chen Wu was being taught the principles of faster-than-light communication by a patient Vorthan. Dr. Maria Santos was getting detailed explanations of matter conversion technology from an enthusiastic Witharan. The Council had established these research facilities as a way to keep human scientists busy with safe projects while monitoring their activities. They allowed humans to study alien technology, but only under strict supervision and only for approved applications like improved agriculture or medical research. Dr. Park, Insight Seeker's mental voice carried a note of curiosity. "Your species shows unusual aptitude for theoretical frameworks. Most newly contacted civilizations require decades to grasp these concepts." James looked up from his work with an expression of innocent pride. "Thank you. I think it's because humans have always been good at looking at problems from different angles. We call it thinking outside the box." "An interesting metaphor. Your cognitive flexibility is indeed noteworthy." What was truly noteworthy was how quickly humans were connecting seemingly unrelated pieces of information. James had already figured out that the quantum resonance frequencies could be modified to create feedback loops in Council technology. Sarah Kim had discovered that SHIELD harmonics could be inverted to create devastating weapon effects. Dr. Wu had realized that the FTL communication principles could be used to override Council command protocols. None of them recorded these insights in their official research logs. Instead, they used an old human tradition that the Council had never bothered to understand: lunch break conversations. "Pass the salt," Maria said during their daily meal in the facility cafeteria. "Sure thing," Chen replied, sliding the shaker across the table. As he did so, his finger tapped out a specific pattern on the table surface. Morse code, an ancient human communication method that predated digital technology by centuries. James picked up the pattern and responded with his own taps while reaching for his drink. To any observer, it looked like nervous fidgeting. In reality, they were exchanging detailed technical specifications for weaponizing Council technology. The aliens monitoring them had translators for thousands of languages, quantum computers that could break most encryption, and sensors that could detect chemical changes in human perspiration. But they had never encountered a species that would use such a primitive method to hide advanced scientific data. After lunch, the researchers returned to their stations with renewed enthusiasm. The Council observers were delighted by their students' dedication. "Today I would like to show you something special," Insight Seeker announced, activating a new holographic display. "This is the technical specifications for our peacekeeping vessels." James tried to look appropriately awed. "These are the ships that patrol human space?" "Indeed. This design has kept peace in the galaxy for over 3,000 years. Observe the power distribution systems." For the next 4 hours, Insight Seeker provided a detailed lecture on Council ship architecture, weapon systems, shield generators, and tactical doctrines. The ethereal clearly enjoyed playing teacher to such an attentive student. James asked thoughtful questions, took careful notes, and made sure to express admiration for the elegant design principles. He also mentally cataloged 17 different ways to disable such vessels using modified versions of the technologies he had learned about earlier. As the workday ended, James gathered his things and prepared to leave. "Thank you for another enlightening session, Insight Seeker. I feel like I learn something new every day. Your progress is satisfactory, Dr. Park. Tomorrow we will discuss the theoretical foundations of matter transmission. I look forward to it." James left the facility and took the transport pod back to his assigned residential sector. The pod's route took him past the orbital shipyards where human vessels sat inactive under Council guard. Massive alien dreadnoughts hung in space nearby, their weapons trained on the planet below as a reminder of who held power. That evening, James attended what appeared to be a book club meeting in his residential complex. 12 humans gathered in Maria Santos's apartment to discuss classic literature. Their conversation focused on themes of resistance and liberation in historical fiction. "I found the chapter about the French resistance particularly moving," said Dr. Kim. "The way they used everyday objects as tools of rebellion was inspiring." "Yes," agreed Chen Wu. "It reminded
me of how the American colonists
used their knowledge of local terrain against a superior military force as they discussed fictional rebellions and historical uprisings. Their hands moved in subtle gestures, tapping out complex mathematical formulas on chair arms and coffee table surfaces. They were sharing the technical knowledge they had gained during the day, combining insights from different research stations to create a comprehensive understanding of Council military capabilities. By the end of the evening, the 12 scientists had assembled detailed plans for disabling Council ships, overriding their command systems and turning their own weapons against them, all while appearing to discuss 19th century literature. "Same time next week?" asked Maria as the group prepared to leave. "Wouldn't miss it," James replied. "I'm particularly interested in discussing that chapter about David and Goliath." Dr. Kim smiled. "Oh yes, that's a wonderful story about how sometimes the smallest stone can bring down the mightiest giant." As the group dispersed, each member carried with them not just the satisfaction of a pleasant literary discussion, but also the knowledge that humanity's intellectual surrender had been as carefully planned as everything else. The Council had given humans access to advanced technology, thinking they could control how that knowledge was used. They had failed to consider that humans had been learning from their enemies for thousands of years, and they had gotten very, very good at it. Ambassador Zethka's mandibles clicked nervously as he reviewed the latest reports from human space. 18 months had passed since the subjugation decree, and every metric suggested complete success. Human compliance rates were at 98%. Industrial output had been successfully redirected to Council-approved projects. There had been no violent incidents, no sabotage, no organized resistance movements. So why did he feel like something was terribly wrong? "The humans are exceeding all expectations," reported Security Chief Vaktul. a massive hegemony officer whose scarred hide told of battles across a dozen worlds. Crime rates in human territories have dropped to nearly zero. Productivity in supervised facilities has increased by 40%. Educational programs teaching council values show remarkable success rates. Zeth Ka studied the data, his compound eyes taking in thousands of details simultaneously. What about the cultural integration programs? Also successful. Human children are learning Galactic standard languages at unprecedented rates. Adult populations are voluntarily attending courses on council history and philosophy. Religious leaders are adapting their teachings to emphasize peace and cooperation. On the surface, it painted a picture of a species gracefully accepting its place in the galactic order. Humans were learning, adapting, and contributing to council society in ways that exceeded the most optimistic projections. What about innovation? Zeth Ka asked. Any signs of unauthorized technological development? Vaktul gestured to another section of the report. Human researchers continue to produce excellent work within approved parameters. Their agricultural improvements have increased food production by 30% across 7 systems. Medical research has led to breakthrough treatments for 3 previously incurable diseases. Their engineering solutions have improved efficiency in council facilities throughout the sector. This should have been reassuring. Instead, it made Zeth Ka's exoskeleton itch with unease. Show me the specific innovations, he commanded. The holographic display filled with technical diagrams and research summaries. Zeth Ka studied them carefully, his analytical mind picking apart each development. Agricultural enhancement through improved soil chemistry, medical treatments using novel protein synthesis, engineering improvements in power distribution and waste processing, all completely legitimate, all clearly beneficial to council interests, all suspiciously perfect. Vaktul, these innovations all have something in common. They demonstrate human creativity working within council guidelines. They demonstrate human understanding of council technology. Zeth Ka highlighted specific sections of each report. Look at these chemical processes. They require detailed knowledge of ether and biological systems. These medical treatments use principles from ethereal quantum biology. These engineering improvements show deep familiarity with hegemony power grid architecture. Vaktul's eyes narrowed as he grasped the implication. You think the humans are learning our military technology by studying civilian applications? I think the humans are learning everything. Zeth Ka called up additional data streams. Cross-reference human personnel assignments with access to council technology. The display shifted, showing a complex web of connections. Human scientists, engineers, technicians, and support staff were present in almost every council facility that dealt with advanced technology. They maintained computers, cleaned laboratories, prepared research materials, and assisted with countless routine tasks. By the void, Vaktul breathed. They've positioned themselves to observe everything we do, and we let them because they're so helpful, Zeth Ka realized. They volunteer for extra duties. They work overtime without complaint. They ask thoughtful questions and show genuine interest in our methods. The security chief was already pulling up surveillance data. I'll review all human activities for the past year. If they're gathering intelligence, you won't find anything obvious, Zeth Ka interrupted. Look at these compliance rates. 98% perfect behavior. That's not natural, Vaktul. No species achieves that level of compliance without either being completely broken or completely united. The psychological evaluation teams concluded that humans had adapted to subjugation with remarkable resilience. Zeth Ka's mandibles clicked faster, or they concluded what the humans wanted them to conclude. He activated a communication channel. Get me Dr. Silas Prime. I want a complete review of all psychological assessments of human behavior. While they waited for the ethereal psychologist to arrive, Zeth Ka continued studying the data. The more he looked, the more patterns emerged. Human children were learning council languages, but they were also maintaining their own linguistic traditions. Human adults attended council philosophy courses, but enrollment in human history and literature classes had somehow increased as well. Most disturbing of all, birth rates in human populations had increased by 12% since the subjugation. Species under occupation typically showed declining birth rates due to stress and uncertainty. Humans were having more children, not fewer. Dr. Silas Prime materialized in the chamber, its crystalline form shimmering with intellectual curiosity. Ambassador Zeth Ka, I understand you have concerns about our psychological assessments? Doctor, your team's concluded that humans have successfully adapted to council authority. I want you to consider an alternative hypothesis, which is that humans have successfully convinced us they've adapted while actually preparing for something else entirely. The ethereal's crystals dimmed slightly. That would require a level of coordinated deception across millions of individuals. Such unity of purpose is virtually impossible without technological enhancement or genetic conditioning. Unless, Zethka said quietly, unity of purpose is exactly what humanity naturally develops when faced with an external threat. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Ambassador Chen's final speech echoed in Zethka's memory. We fight for the right to fight. We fight for the right to be wrong. We fight for the right to make our own mistakes. If I'm correct, Zethka continued, then every moment of human compliance, every act of cooperation, every expression of acceptance has been part of a coordinated strategy. They're not just gathering intelligence about our technology. They're studying our psychology, our tactics, our weaknesses. Vaktul's hand moved to his weapon. Then we crush them now before whatever they're planning can come to fruition. With what justification? Zethka demanded. They've violated no laws, broken no agreements. They've been model subjects in every measurable way. If we act against them without proof of wrongdoing, we become the aggressors. So what do you propose? Zethka looked at the reports again, seeing them now with new understanding. Every human innovation, every helpful suggestion, every voluntary cooperation had been a chess move in a game the Council hadn't realized they were playing. We test them, he said finally. We create a situation that requires humans to choose between their loyalty to the Council and their loyalty to each other. If I'm wrong, they'll choose the Council and our concerns will be proven groundless. And if you're right, Zethka's mandibles clicked one final time. Then we'll discover what happens when humanity decides to stop pretending. As the meeting disbanded, none of the Council members noticed that the maintenance worker cleaning the conference room was human, or that the human had been present for the entire discussion, quietly emptying waste receptacles and sanitizing surfaces while absorbing every word. Marcus Webb finished his cleaning duties and made his way through the station corridors, nodding politely to the alien supervisors he passed. His route took him past a dozen other human workers, each engaged in routine tasks. A subtle gesture here, a brief eye contact there, and the information began to flow through the human network like water through a carefully designed irrigation system. By the time Marcus completed his shift, every human on the station knew that the Council was beginning to suspect. Phase 3 would need to be accelerated. The game was about to become much more interesting. The test came exactly 3 weeks later, designed with typical Council precision to appear completely natural. Ambassador Zethka watched from his private observation deck as the scenario unfolded in the Kepler mining colony, one of humanity's most productive facilities under Council oversight. A routine safety inspection had discovered critical structural damage in the colony's primary habitat dome. The hegemony engineers declared the section unsafe and ordered immediate evacuation. 3,000 human workers would need to be relocated to temporary facilities that could only accommodate 2,000. The remaining 1,000 would be selected by lottery and transported to a Vorthen processing station in a neighboring system, where they would be assigned new work details. Families would be separated. Communities would be broken apart. But it was all presented as an unfortunate necessity, driven by circumstances beyond anyone's control. Zethka's real interest lay in how humans would respond to the impossible choice. Would they accept the Council's decision with the same compliance they had shown for 2 years? Would they volunteer to protect their loved ones? Would they finally crack under pressure and reveal their true nature? Captain Lisa Rodriguez, the colony's human administrator, stood before the assembled population in the main auditorium. Behind her, hegemony security forces maintained a visible presence while Council observers monitored everything through advanced surveillance systems. As you've all heard, Rodriguez began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was announcing. Structural damage has been discovered in Habitat Section C. For our safety, the Council has ordered immediate evacuation. The crowd was silent. 3,000 faces looked back at her, and Zethka noted the absence of panic or outcry. Humans simply listened, processing the information with unsettling calm. The temporary relocation facilities can accommodate 2,000 people, Rodriguez continued. The remaining 1,000 will be assigned to new positions in the Centauri system. The selection will be conducted by random lottery to ensure fairness. A hand went up in the crowd. Captain, what about families? Will they be kept together? The council will make every effort to minimize family separation, Rodriguez replied, using the exact wording that had been approved by the overseeing officials. More hands appeared, and Rodriguez fielded questions with practiced efficiency. What about personal belongings? When would the lottery take place? How long would the assignments last? Every answer followed council guidelines perfectly. Zethka felt his unease growing. This was exactly the kind of situation that should have provoked an emotional response from humans. Previous psychological studies indicated that family separation was one of the most traumatic experiences for their species, yet they were discussing the matter as if it were a minor scheduling inconvenience. The lottery will begin tomorrow morning, Rodriguez announced. Report to your designated areas at 0800. That's all for now. The crowd dispersed quietly. No arguments, no protests, no desperate appeals for alternative solutions. They simply went about their evening routines as if nothing unusual had happened. That night, Zethka monitored the surveillance feeds from across the colony. Humans ate dinner, helped their children with homework, played games, read books, and went to bed at their usual times. The only unusual activity was a slight increase in communication traffic, but even that consisted of mundane conversations about work schedules and social plans. The next morning, the lottery proceeded exactly as planned. Names were drawn randomly from a computer database. Those selected stepped forward without drama. Families said goodbye with hugs and promises to stay in touch. Children cried briefly but were comforted by parents who assured them everything would be fine. Within 6 hours, the 1,000 selected humans had boarded transport ships and departed for their new assignments. The remaining population resumed normal activities without apparent distress. Sir, reported Security Chief Vaktul, we've monitored all communications. No signs of organized resistance. No evidence of hidden plans. The humans appear to have accepted the relocation exactly as presented. Zethka stared at the data in frustration. Either he had been completely wrong about human nature, or he was witnessing the most sophisticated deception in galactic history. What about the relocated individuals? Any problems with their integration? None whatsoever. They've reported to their new assignments and begun working with typical human efficiency. No complaints, no requests for transfers, no attempts to contact their families through unauthorized channels. It was too perfect. Zethka's paranoia shifted into overdrive as he considered possibilities. What if the humans weren't planning a rebellion at all? What if they were planning something else entirely? Vaktul, I want you to conduct a detailed analysis of the relocated humans. Not just their behavior, but their specific skill sets and the positions they've been assigned. Sir, just do it. And cross-reference with similar relocations over the past 2 years. While Vaktul compiled the data, Zethka reviewed the surveillance footage again, this time focusing on details rather than general behavior. Gradually, subtle patterns began to emerge. Conversations that seemed random actually followed specific linguistic patterns. Social interactions that appeared casual were actually highly structured. Even the children's play activities showed unusual organization. Most telling of all was what he didn't see. In a population undergoing forced relocation and family separation, there should have been support groups forming. Humans should have been seeking comfort from religious leaders, counselors, or community organizers. Instead, they seemed to draw strength from ordinary daily interactions with no apparent emotional processing. Ambassador, Vaktul's voice carried a note of concern. I've completed the analysis you requested. What did you find? The relocated humans represent a precise cross-section of technical specialists. Engineers, computer technicians, communications experts, medical personnel, and logistics coordinators. They've been placed in positions that give them access to critical infrastructure across 17 different council facilities. Zethka felt his blood turn cold. Show me the pattern for all relocations over the past 2 years. The holographic display painted a picture that made his worst fears seem naive. Humans hadn't just been placed randomly throughout council space. They had been systematically positioned in key locations across the entire administrative network. Every major military base, every crucial communication hub, every important research facility now had human personnel in critical support roles. By the void, Zethka whispered. They haven't been preparing for a rebellion. They've been preparing for a coordinated strike across the entire council infrastructure. But that's impossible, Vaktul protested. The level of planning required would take decades, and how could they coordinate such an effort without our surveillance detecting it? Zethka thought back to Ambassador Chen's final speech. We fight for the right to make our own mistakes and learn from them. What if this entire subjugation had been humanity's way of learning? What if every act of compliance had been an intelligence-gathering operation? Contact Admiral Korthvel immediately, Zethka ordered. I want a full security review of every council facility with human personnel. Sir, that's virtually every important installation in the sector. Exactly. As Vaktul rushed to implement the new security protocols, Zethka stared at the tactical display showing human deployments across council space. Red dots marking human positions formed a web that touched every critical system in the galactic government. If he was right, then humanity had spent 2 years of apparent submission, actually putting the pieces in place for the most audacious military operation in galactic history, and they had done it so perfectly that the council had helped them every step of the way. The test had revealed the truth, but not the truth Zethka had expected to find. Humans hadn't broken under pressure because they weren't feeling any pressure. They were exactly where they wanted to be, doing exactly what they had planned to do. The question now was whether the council could respond to a threat they had unknowingly created before humanity decided to show them what rebellion really looked like. Admiral Korthvel's emergency briefing began at Oro 300 station time, with representatives from every major council species attending via quantum link. The holographic conference room buzzed with tension as military leaders who had governed the galaxy for millennia tried to comprehend the scope of their oversight. The situation is unprecedented, Korthvel began, his reptilian features grim under the harsh lighting. Our analysis suggests that human personnel are now embedded in critical positions throughout our entire administrative and military infrastructure. High Arbitrator Vex 9's crystalline form pulsed with angry red light. How is this possible? Every placement was approved through proper channels. Every human was thoroughly screened and monitored. That's exactly the problem, Ambassador Zethka interjected from his position at the conference table. We screened them for loyalty and competence. We didn't screen them for strategic thinking. We placed them where we needed workers, not where they wanted to be. The Vorthan defense minister's tentacles writhed with agitation. You're suggesting that humans manipulated our placement decisions across hundreds of facilities. I'm suggesting that humans are better at long-term planning than we gave them credit for. Zethka activated a tactical display showing the distribution of human personnel. Look at this pattern. They're not just in random positions, they're in positions that would allow coordinated action across our entire command structure. General Thaxmore of the Wytheren military leaned forward, his insectoid features clicking with concern. Even if your assessment is correct, they're still outnumbered 10,000 to 1. What could they possibly accomplish? Let me show you, replied Dr. James Park. The conference room fell silent as the human scientist materialized in the center of the holographic display. He stood calmly, hands clasped behind his back, showing no signs of the fear or deference the council had grown accustomed to from human interactions. Dr. Park, Admiral Korthvel's voice carried deadly warning. You are in violation of security protocols by accessing this communication channel. Actually, I'm not, James replied pleasantly. I'm using standard maintenance access codes that were provided to me for routine system diagnostics. The same codes that thousands of other humans have been using for the past 2 years to keep your networks running smoothly. Ambassador Zethka felt his worst fears crystallizing. You've been inside our communication systems this entire time. Inside them? Ambassador, we've been maintaining them, upgrading them, optimizing them, making them more efficient and more interconnected than they've ever been. James gestured, and the tactical display shifted to show the Council's communication network in real time. Would you like to see what we've accomplished? Red warning indicators began appearing across the display. Communication nodes went offline in sequence, creating expanding dark zones across the galactic map. Then just as quickly they came back online, but now the data flows showed different patterns. What have you done? Vex 9 demanded. We've demonstrated that your network security is entirely dependent on the good intentions of your maintenance staff, James replied. Every message you've sent for the past 18 months has been copied and analyzed. Every tactical plan, every security protocol, every contingency strategy. We know how you think, how you fight, and how you respond to threats. General Thaxmore's mandibles clicked frantically. Impossible. Our encryption is unbreakable. Your encryption is excellent, James agreed. But encryption doesn't help when we have physical access to the systems. We didn't break your codes. We just read the data before you encrypted it and after you decrypted it. The implications hit the council leaders like a physical blow. For 2 years they had believed they were monitoring human activity while humans were actually monitoring them. You're declaring war, Admiral Korthvel stated flatly. No. James shook his head. We're declaring independence. There's a difference. Not from our perspective. James smiled, and something in that expression made several council members flinch. Admiral, that's exactly the problem. You've never bothered to understand our perspective. You decided what was best for us without asking what we wanted. You created a system where we had to choose between freedom and survival. You chose survival, Vex9 pointed out. We chose both. The tactical display shifted again, this time showing council military assets throughout the sector. Hundreds of ships, dozens of stations, and massive orbital defense platforms. As they watched, status indicators began changing from green to amber. Your fleet commanders are currently receiving reports of minor technical difficulties, James explained conversationally. Navigation systems requiring calibration, weapons arrays needing diagnostic checks, shield generators developing harmonic resonances. Nothing that can't be fixed by the human technical staff who maintain those systems. You're sabotaging our ships? We're reminding you that technology is only as reliable as the people who maintain it. James paused, letting that sink in. Every vessel in your fleet depends on human technicians for routine maintenance. Every communication relay requires human oversight to function efficiently. Every orbital facility needs human workers to operate at full capacity. Admiral Korthvel was already issuing orders to his staff officers. Implement Protocol 7 immediately. Secure all critical systems and restrict human access. You can try, James said mildly, but your automated systems aren't as sophisticated as you think. Take humans out of the equation, and your operational efficiency drops by approximately 60%. Your ships will still fly, but they won't fly well. Your communications will still function, but with significant delays and errors. Your stations will still operate, but barely. The horrible truth was becoming clear. The council had become dependent on human expertise without realizing it. In their arrogance, they had assumed that human cooperation was a sign of submission rather than strategy. What do you want? Vex9 asked finally. What we've always wanted. The right to govern ourselves. The right to make our own mistakes. The right to explore the galaxy as equals rather than subjects. Unacceptable, General Thaxmore declared. You are a Class D civilization. You lack the wisdom to govern yourselves responsibly. James's expression hardened slightly. General, with respect, we've spent 2 years proving that we're responsible enough to maintain your civilization. We've increased efficiency, improved security, and enhanced performance across every system we've touched. If we're competent enough to keep your technology running, we're competent enough to run our own affairs. You've been deceiving us for 2 years, Ambassador Zethka accused. We've been surviving for 2 years, James corrected. You gave us a choice between extinction and enslavement. We found a third option. The conference room erupted in arguments as council leaders struggled to find a response to humanity's impossible position. They couldn't use force without crippling their own infrastructure. They couldn't maintain control without human cooperation. They couldn't trust humans, but they couldn't function without them. There is another option, James said quietly, and his voice cut through the chaos. You could try treating us as equals. You might be surprised at what genuine cooperation looks like. And if we refuse? Admiral Korthvel asked. James's smile returned, but this time it was cold and predatory. Then you'll discover what happens when a species that doesn't know when to quit decides to stop being helpful. The transmission ended, leaving the council leaders staring at a tactical display that showed their mighty fleet suddenly looking very vulnerable indeed. Outside the conference room, across hundreds of council facilities, human technicians continued their routine maintenance duties with the same cheerful efficiency they had shown for 2 years. But now every adjustment they made, every system they calibrated, and every diagnostic they ran carried the implicit threat of what they could do if cooperation turned to conflict. The Council had subjugated humanity, but in doing so, they had given humans something far more valuable than freedom, the knowledge and position necessary to take it. 6 months later, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood once again in the council chamber, but this time the dynamics had shifted dramatically. The same representatives who had voted unanimously for humanity's subjugation now sat in uncomfortable silence as she addressed them from the central platform previously reserved for council leadership. Honored delegates, Chen began, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needed to ask for permission to speak. I appear before you today to present the final terms of the Human Independence Accord. High Arbitrator Vex 9's crystalline form had lost much of its authoritative luster. Her once commanding purple glow had dimmed to an uncertain violet. Ambassador Chen, the Council wishes to emphasize that these negotiations are proceeding under duress. I understand your position, Chen replied diplomatically, just as I hope you now understand ours. The past 6 months had been a masterclass in applied leverage. Humanity hadn't fired a single shot or destroyed a single piece of equipment. They had simply begun working to regulation rather than working to excellence. Ships took longer to repair. Communication systems experienced more downtime. Research projects proceeded at precisely the minimum acceptable pace. The Council's mighty war machine had ground to an uncomfortable crawl, maintained by humans who followed every protocol to the letter, while somehow accomplishing half as much as they had before. Ambassador Zeth Ka shifted nervously in his seat. The terms you propose are extensive. They are comprehensive, Chen corrected. Humanity has learned much about galactic governance during our time under Council authority. We believe we can offer valuable insights. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The species the Council had deemed too primitive for self-governance was now proposing reforms to the galactic government itself. Let's review the key points, Chen continued. Activating a holographic display. First, the immediate recognition of human sovereignty over our home system and all colonies established prior to subjugation. This had been the easy part of the negotiations. The Council couldn't maintain control over human space without human cooperation, and humans had made it clear that cooperation required freedom. Second, the establishment of humanity as a full Council member with voting rights equivalent to other founding species. This had been harder to accept. Several delegates still grumbled about elevating a Class D civilization to their level, but human technical competence had proven impossible to ignore. Third, the implementation of new protocols for contact with emerging civilizations, including mandatory consultation periods and graduated integration processes. This was where humanity's true agenda revealed itself. They weren't just seeking their own freedom. They were trying to prevent other species from experiencing the same forced subjugation. General Thaxmore's mandibles clicked with barely contained frustration. You're asking us to completely revise 3 millennia of successful galactic governance. I'm asking you to revise 3 millennia of galactic domination, Chen replied calmly. There's a difference between governance and control, General. One builds consensus, the other breeds resentment. Dr. James Park, now serving as humanity's chief technology advisor, stepped forward to address the assembly. Honored delegates, I'd like to share some data that might inform your decision. The holographic display shifted to show efficiency ratings across Council space. These metrics show system performance over the past 2 years. Notice the improvements that began after human integration, and the decline that started when cooperation became less enthusiastic. The numbers were undeniable. Human involvement had made Council systems work better than they ever had before. Human withdrawal of that enthusiasm had brought performance below historical averages. More importantly, Dr. Park continued, these improvements weren't achieved through superior technology or resources. They were achieved through different approaches to problem solving. Humans tend to look for solutions that the existing paradigm considers impossible. Admiral Korth Vell spoke for the first time during the session. Dr. Park, your people have demonstrated remarkable capabilities in systems integration and strategic planning. Perhaps more remarkable than many of us initially realized. Thank you, Admiral. But I think you're still missing the larger point, which is, The capabilities you're noting aren't unique to humans. Every species has unique perspectives and problem-solving approaches. The Council's traditional model of governance by the most powerful species means you're only utilizing a fraction of the galaxy's intellectual resources. Chen took control of the presentation again, which brings us to the fourth and most important aspect of our proposal: the establishment of a true cooperative framework for galactic governance. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't just demanding independence. They were proposing a complete restructuring of galactic civilization. Under this framework, Chen continued, Council membership would be based on contribution and cooperation, rather than military power or technological advancement. New species would be integrated as partners rather than subjects. Decision-making would involve genuine consultation with affected populations. Impossible, declared the Vorthan Defense Minister. The galaxy requires strong central authority to maintain peace and order. Does it? Chen challenged. Or does it require effective coordination and mutual respect? The past 2 years have shown that voluntary cooperation produces better results than imposed compliance. Ambassador Zethka studied the proposal carefully, his analytical mind working through the ramifications. Ambassador Chen, what you're describing would fundamentally alter the balance of power in galactic civilization. Yes, Chen agreed. It would replace a balance of power with a balance of partnership. And if we refuse these terms? Chen's expression grew serious. Then humanity will withdraw from all Council facilities and territories. You'll be free to govern the galaxy exactly as you did before we arrived. We'll be free to develop our own technology and explore our own path among the stars. The threat was implicit but clear. Humanity would take with them all the improvements they had made to Council systems. More importantly, they would take with them all the knowledge they had gained about Council technology and tactics. That would mean isolation for your species. Vex 9 pointed out. Isolation is preferable to subjugation, Chen replied. But cooperation is preferable to both. The debate continued for hours, with delegates raising objections, proposing modifications, and arguing among themselves. But gradually, the reality of their situation became undeniable. The Council could either evolve to include humanity as an equal partner, or they could return to their previous limitations while humanity charted its own course. Finally, High Arbitrator Vex 9 called for a formal vote. All those in favor of accepting the Human Independence Accord as proposed? The vote wasn't unanimous this time. Several delegates abstained and a few voted against, but the majority recognized that partnership was preferable to the alternatives. The motion passes, Vex 9 announced. The Human Independence Accord is hereby ratified. Chen smiled as she looked up at the assembled representatives. Thank you, honored delegates. I believe this marks the beginning of a new era for galactic civilization. As the session concluded and delegates began to file out, Ambassador Zethka approached Chen privately. Ambassador, I must ask, was this entire scenario planned from the beginning? Did humanity intend to revolutionize galactic governance when you first arrived? Chen considered the question carefully. Ambassador Zethka, humans have a saying. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. We didn't plan to reform the Council, but when the opportunity arose, we chose to take it. And if the opportunity hadn't arisen, then we would have found another way to achieve what we needed. That's what humans do. We adapt, we improvise, and we find solutions that others consider impossible. Zethka's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned to recognize as appreciation. I believe I understand now why Ambassador Chen made that speech about humans not knowing when to quit. Do you? You weren't warning us about your capacity for violence. You were warning us about your capacity for persistence. You don't stop trying until you find a way to win. Chen nodded. And now that we've found a way for everyone to win, perhaps we can focus our persistence on building something better together. As the chamber emptied, holographic displays throughout Council space began updating to reflect the new political reality. Humanity had achieved in 2 years what most species couldn't accomplish in centuries. They had changed the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. They had done it not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through superior strategy and an absolute refusal to accept that the current situation was the only possible one. The Council had subjugated humanity and learned too late what that really meant. They had given the most persistent species in the galaxy both the motivation and the opportunity to prove that there was always another way. And in the end, humanity's greatest victory wasn't their freedom, it was convincing their former masters that freedom was better for everyone.